Thank you for joining us today for another great episode of Clean Money Podcast. Today, we're going to continue our series, Tales from the Dark Side of Real Estate, where we share some of the more interesting stories of our adventures in this business. And no, you can already tell I do not have a future for me with, impersonating voices or not. Obviously, these kinds of stories that are rarely shared. You never hear this stuff. You only hear all the sunshines and rainbows. And of course, as you know, it is not all sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns. These will be short episodes. Hope you enjoy listening. And if you have any experiences yourself or crazy stories that you want to share, feel free to leave comments and let us know. And, maybe you'll make it on the show with us. That'd be great. So today, we're going to talk about an apartment complex that we cannot name. Actually, legally, we cannot name. We came to an agreement that we would not name this place. But this was a couple of years ago. We found this 150 something unit apartment complex in downtown Dallas. A great location, but a very old complex, beautiful in its own right. But as we were going through our initial inspection, we saw cracks in the construction. So we knew that there was definitely some kind of something going on. And anyhow, as we got into the due diligence on there, we saw that there was a great opportunity, great asset, location for sure. And there was some opportunity. Some syndicators owned it, was offloading it. And this was in the era when before prices went too crazy, but interest rates had already dropped. So we were feeling pretty good about our target place. As we started to get into the due diligence, we put under contract, we got into due diligence, and Jesse, what did we find? What did you start? What happened?
Yeah, so I want to paint the picture a little more, right? This is located, like Sam said, downtown Dallas, right outside of, literally across the street from Highland Park. These several million dollar homes. It's beautiful brick buildings, nice pool, granite countertops. This is a nice place, right? You wouldn't think it'd be such a crappy situation. And we were just looking to do some small upgrades, just kind of modernize it, get it caught up. But during due diligence, first off, we discovered it was a pier and beam property, which is interesting. Not normal slab. This is on pier and beams. So we did, normal stuff, stuck some cameras down there and see if we could figure out if there's any issues with plumbing or anything with the pier and beam structure. And we discovered while they're actually looking at it that there's some leaks down there. So we ended up having those guys go out there and excavate and actually kind of dig out a tunnel to get back in there and look at it. And while they're down there, they could hear and see toilets flushing and just pouring all on the ground and all over those piers and beams.
So crap is literally landing beside, these guys who are underneath this building when, you can just imagine, just hear that stuff hit the dirt.
Yeah. So literally we had to replace a lot of the pier and beams. We had tons of issues. And then when we went to the seller and said, hey, there's this massive issue in this property, what did they say, Sam? Said something crazy.
They said, well, our guy says it's not an issue. Like, well, who's your guy? Your maintenance man? And these guys, the owners weren't from Texas. But in general, if you have a lot of moisture under in a crawl space with wooden beams or a building and 50 years of, I don't know how long the moisture's been down there, what are you going to have? What's going to happen to all those wood floors, all the wood beams, and everything else? Rot. And there was a lot of rot down there. So you can just imagine, out of these 20 different buildings, and the poop fell out of one of them, but the other ones, we only were able to get under like 5 or 6 of all these buildings. And every single one of them had except for maybe one, had plumbing issues where water was on the ground. There was moisture.
Yeah. You actually just reminded me. I forgot about this when we were talking about it earlier, but I remember walking the units and you could smell it in places. So people were literally living in these units where you could smell raw sewage, not realize that it's underneath them. So now we also have an environmental issue that we have
And
get in trouble
mold,
with. And
probably
mold.
tons of black mold in the walls. And so we we go to the sellers and we're like, hey, like this is all the stuff. And we even had a structural engineer go out there. We paid $13,700 and something to have this guy go out there and do a very detailed analysis, because we're not going to buy a property and then just pretend that those issues are there, or patch up the plumbing, which would be pretty cheap ish, and then not deal with all the rot where somebody someday is sitting in the couch in their living room and their entire floor falls through. Circa, what was that old movie with Tom Hanks, Money Pit, where they just, literally fall through the floor. So as good stewards and owners, we weren't about to take this on and pretend. And so we go to the owners. We're like, hey guys, we're thinking that we're dealing with honest, good, people. Hey, maybe they just didn't know, they didn't stick their heads under it. And the response from them was about as rude as it gets. They're like, no, our guy says it's not, pay the price. You guys, you're under contract for $17 million, pay the price. I'm like, no, there's literally just the plumbing work that was recommended by the structural engineer, we had multiple quotes by others. We were coming in at over $1 million worth of just plumbing repair, not counting all repairing wood beams, the structures, not counting any mold that's in the walls. You're probably going to need to get mold test in there. Your residents are probably getting sick and they're pretending it's not happening or blaming it on something else. Just the amount of issues just you start pulling out of this Pandora's box was just incredible. Nightmare. So we asked for, I think all in told, we figured it would probably cost as much as $3 million worth of repair, because you're going to have to bust up all this concrete, sidewalks, get underneath the building. Some of the buildings we would have to get under. You had to shore up the beam so the buildings don't fall apart. And then you have loss of revenues. You're going to have to vacate a lot of those bottom units because you're going to have to rip up the floors, which the floors were bowed. We could tell right when we first walked in that the floors were bowed. But they said, oh, that stuff was fixed. It was not fixed. That was a lie. And if there's mold remediation that has to happen, that stuff gets super expensive. I think, what was it on another project, Jesse, what they quoted us to do mold remediation in one unit?
Oh, it's crazy. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's absolutely insane. Because you have to get a license to a city, get inspected. It's pricey quick.
And it's downtown Dallas, so it's not like we can, try and just do it ourselves with our handyman. It's going to have to get, permitted, and everything's going to have to get done correctly, the right way. And so then you're losing all the revenues. You're probably vacating 80 units over time. People aren't going to be able to park because we're going to have to dig through the parking lots because all the pipes going out were busted up and leaking into the earth. And it was just a nightmare. So we asked for, I think we said, hey, we'll do $2.5 million write down, and we'll go through all the pain to take care of this project. And their response was, go to hell. We'll find somebody else to buy it.
Yeah. Long story short, we didn't do that deal.
Long story short, we did not do that deal. In fact, we said, okay, well, at least, give us our earnest money back. And we've already spent $20,000 on this stuff. and all these things were known, or a lot of it was known and not disclosed. They should have been disclosed. And they said, yeah, but the contract says it doesn't have to be disclosed. So we are not giving you your earnest money back. And unfortunately, you think you're dealing with honest brokers, you think you're dealing with reasonable people. And in this case, they were not reasonable at all. Some syndicators came from a wealthy family out on the West Coast. And yeah, unfortunately, we lost a lot of money on that deal, but we walked away and some other syndicator bought it.
Good for them.
So if you invested with some syndicators who did not do their due diligence on a project, and you own it and it's a 1950s asset in downtown Dallas, you might want to reach out to us because, or not us, you might want to reach out to your operating partner there, or the person you invested with, and see what's going on with the plumbing and underneath the building, particularly if it's on a pier beam. Folks, if you do not do your due diligence, you can find,
That's
if
$3
you don't
million.
do it,
$3 million that they didn't account for, they probably will have to shell out eventually, or they're going to have to face more issues. So that's, if you don't account for it, that's a huge difference to what you're getting your property.
and where are you going to get that money? I mean, if you don't have $3 million setting aside, because you're going to have to pay for that. And you can't raise rents a single dollar. And if Dallas ever has a slight earthquake, those buildings are coming down. Sorry. All right. On that good note, if you have any due diligence stories where you did or did not do your due diligence and you got surprised by something, we can share a story when our early days on another pod, when we did not do our due diligence. We bought something in 5 days and we had a few surprises that had been buried under the dirt. So if you want to hear that story and many others from the Tales from the Dark Side of Real Estate, join Jesse and I on the Clean Money podcast and just be grateful that it wasn't you. All right, all. Thanks, and talk to you next time.